Bienvenue. Welcome to the EMSB's ParentCon 2023 Lunch and Learn series. My name is Marika Ramundo, and I am a parent volunteer with the EMSB. The purpose of this virtual Lunch and Learn series is to provide you with some valuable information, tips, and strategies to help you navigate the joys and challenges of parenting. We understand that being a parent is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. We appreciate the time you've set aside to be here with us. So grab a cup of coffee or your favorite lunch and settle in for what promises to be an informative and an enjoyable session. The topic for today is hearing myths and facts. Despite the advent of social media, the internet, and a move towards a more inclusive society, there are still so many misconceptions about hearing loss, and the impact of our noisy world on our everyday lives. Tracey Green and Salvatore Piccolo from the Montreal Oral School for the Deaf will share facts and debunk myths and misconceptions in this interactive session. Tracey Green is an itinerant educational specialist at the Montreal Oral School for the Deaf and a certified teacher of the deaf, with years of experience teaching children with hearing loss to listen, speak, and develop self-determination and competence in the mainstream classroom. Tracey has a Master's of Arts in Child Studies and Education and has taught in the elementary classroom. She is a Google for Education certified teacher and holds a graduate certificates in Auditory Verbal Studies and Educational Leadership. Salvatore Piccolo is an itinerant educational specialist for students with hearing loss at the Montreal Oral School for the Deaf as well. With over 15 years of experience teaching children with hearing loss to listen and speak, as well as develop self-determination and competence in the mainstream classroom. Salvatore has an MA in Applied Linguistics and Teaching, and he has taught abroad in elementary and high school classrooms and in university. Salvatore completed courses in oral communication and oral interpreting for the deaf, a graduate course in audiology, and courses in auditory verbal studies at the University of Ottawa. Take it away, Tracey and Salvatore.
Hi, and welcome to Myths and Facts About Hearing. We chose to present on this topic today because there's so much misinformation going around about hearing, and certainly it's something that many of us take for granted, and we don't tend to find out more until there's something that happens and it touches us closely. So we thought we'd play a little game, something light and fun for lunch hour, something where we can dispel some myths and also share some facts. So, are you ready? Come along.
Hi, everyone, and welcome aboard. My name is Sal Piccolo, and that was Tracey Green, my colleague. We are both itinerant educational specialists at the Montreal Oral School for the Deaf.
All right, so before we begin, I thought we'd talk about hearing in a nutshell. We hear with our brains, not with our ears. Now, that's the weirdest thing you've heard today, isn't it? Most people think when we're going to talk about, let's play Simon Says, touch the part of your body that helps you hear, everybody automatically puts their hands to their ears. But you know what? The ears are honestly just the way in. They're the doorway. But the brain is what does the real hearing and listening. It's what determines what are we actually hearing. So when we think about ears and brains in that kind of way, then we have to think about hearing loss being a doorway issue. Something is blocking that sound, not blocking the sound, I shouldn't say that, but blocking the information to getting to the brain.
Well, everyone, I hope you're ready, and I hope you have your pens and papers ready to start playing the game with Tracey and I. First, I or she will read out a statement. We'll give you a moment of reflection, a time to think about whether it's myth or fact. And yes, we will reveal whether it's myth or fact, and it won't end there. Then we'll share some information about that particular statement, and hopefully the information we'll share with you will resonate with you, and you'll take home some new and interesting ideas that you can spread with your friends and family and even your children. So are you ready? Let's go. The first statement is, a baby begins hearing in utero at around 20 weeks gestational age. Myth or fact?
And that would be a fact. A baby starts hearing in utero just about halfway through pregnancy, somewhere between 20 to 25 weeks. And while it's not perfect hearing, because they're still in the amniotic sac, it sounds a little bit like they're underwater, kind of like what you would hear when you're at a swimming pool. They are hearing. They are starting to make connections to what does your voice sound like, and those that are part of their family are closest to them. But really, what makes this fact most important is the fact that we know that most children with hearing loss are born to hearing parents. It means that children who are born with hearing loss are already behind their peers right out the gate. This makes newborn hearing screening so important because we want to give that baby, and essentially the baby's brain, access to language right from the get-go. And for that to happen, we need to know whether there's a hearing loss or not. If there is a hearing loss, we want to get those amplification devices on that baby as early as possible. Or we want to start signing with that baby to give them access to language, because really that's the key. That's what's going to push them forward, language. It's really all about that.
I think what you said, Tracey, about babies with hearing loss being born behind, already being behind because they've missed that time in the womb where they listen to their mother's voices and music played in the environment. I think that's really important because we can, begin asking questions, or we can begin thinking about what is it that we can do so that, the infants can catch up. And what we can do is exactly what you said, fit them with with amplification devices, hearing aids, or bone-anchored hearing aids, or implants. As long as these infants have access, then we can provide them with those, the stimulation they've missed. That's really what it comes down to. The stimulation in the brain, the auditory stimulation. Once those nerves are stimulated and that part of the brain is stimulated and activated, then they'll be readier for school to listen and to learn. So yes, it does come down to learning language, learning and developing those speech and language skills. And that part in the womb is just as important, if not more, because that's the foundation. That's where the magic all begins.
Right. It's all about meeting those developmental milestones. All right, let's look at the next one. Hearing can be fully restored with appropriate amplification. Myth or fact?
It is a myth. Hearing amplification devices don't restore hearing like most people think they do. Please keep in mind that the ear is intricate. It's an intricate organ because there are so many things that involved for us to hear. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is that there are about 20,000 hair cells in our cochleas that move back and forth and stimulate the auditory nerve. Kids who are born with a sensory neural hearing loss have those hair cells damaged. And no matter what we do, those hair cells cannot be replaced. Essentially, what I'm getting to is that amplification devices do just that. They amplify sound. They don't clarify it. Once those hair cells are damaged or fall off, that means that clarity is lost. So unlike glasses, where clarity is restored, amplification devices like hearing aids, bone-anchored hearing aids, and cochlear implants just make sounds louder. Unfortunately, technology hasn't evolved to the point where hearing is restored to what natural hearing sounds like.
I like that analogy that you used about the glasses. So when we get a prescription from our ophthalmologist or optometrist, if it's a good prescription, you put your glasses on and it's as if you could always see. And then with that information, you're ready to go. You walk off and you're feeling really good about yourself. You're back to seeing all those little things that you were missing. But the thing about amplification devices is we put them on. And yes, things are louder. And for certain types of hearing loss, that's all they need. But for some other types of hearing loss, like you mentioned, Sal, the sensory neural hearing loss or a mixed hearing loss, those children or those people, it's not just for children, those will need auditory training to help them really make sense of what they're hearing, help them use their listening skills and, develop that listening brain to be able to make sense of what they're hearing, fill in what they might be missing, realize that what a doorbell sounds like to me and what a doorbell sounds like to someone else may not be the same, but it's the doorbell. And it really kind of highlights some of the work that we do with our children every day, right? Like we do work on their listening skills, and auditory training is so, so, so important. It's a key part to making sure that they're able to function in the mainstream classroom. All right, are you ready for another one?
Absolutely. Let's go for it. The next statement is 1 in 5 children will experience hearing loss throughout the year due to ear infection. Myth or fact?
And this would be a fact. Let that sink in for a minute. 1 in 5 children in any classroom, if we think about what we have here on the island of Montreal or in our greater Montreal area, we're talking about classrooms of 25 to 30 kids these days. That means that there's going to be potentially at any given time 5 or 6 students in the class that might be dealing with some difficulty hearing and listening due to an ear infection. And here's the part that makes this even more fascinating. I'm willing to bet that 1 in 5 does not represent those children who have been identified as having a hearing loss. So those kids who are at any moment in time in the classroom having an ear infection are not the ones that you have at top of mind. They're not the ones that are using the FMDM system. They're not the ones that have the IEP reminding you that you need to be keeping in mind the accommodations outlined. You know what? It does make me think, though, that the accommodations that we put in place for those students with hearing loss, they're essential for them, but clearly they could benefit all, especially if you consider the fact that, we never know who those children are going to be. And I just want to point out, when we think about an ear infection, what comes to mind right away? Pain in the ear, right? Fluid in the ear, pain in the ear. But I want to point out something. It doesn't have to be an ear infection. It doesn't, well, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes the liquid is infected, but sometimes there's fluid in the ear at the ear level and it's blocking sound. Like I said, go back to the earlier slide when we talk about, listening in a swimming pool. Listening underwater is not easy. Everything sounds muffled. Doesn't even have to be an ear infection. It just needs to be fluid buildup in the ear, which we know is very common in little ones until about 7 or 8 years old when that eustachian tube drops. And how are we going to, monitor that in the classroom? Not every kiddo is going to come up and say, hey, I'm having a hard time hearing today. And the little ones, some of them don't even realize. So bearing in mind that 1 in 5 in any classroom may be dealing with a hearing loss due to an ear infection at any given time is so, so, so important.
Tracey, if 1 in 5 may be dealing with a temporary hearing loss due to an ear infection, wouldn't that number increase for kids who just have the common cold or come to school with a stuffy nose or a sore throat? If the number does go up, which it does, we have a lot of kids who may be falling through the cracks. So what are some things that teachers can look out for? I'm thinking maybe a hoarse voice, watery eyes, a runny nose. All of these may be good indicators that that child's hearing may be compromised, whether it's for a day, 2 days, or a week, whatever the amount of time is. It's a missed learning opportunity because hearing is compromised. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean they don't hear anything. Of course, they'll hear their name if you call them. Of course, they'll be able to have a conversation face to face. But given, you know, when we take into consideration the distance, if that child is not at the front of the class, is in the back of the class, or even if the child is in front of the class, close to the teacher or close to the parent at the dinner table, if there's noise in the environment, well, it's going to be that much more difficult for that child to hear.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I really like what you said. And you brought to mind behavior. Behavior is one of those things that we never kind of take a moment to think about. Why is the kiddo behaving that way? Rather than say, hey, stop it. You know, as a teacher, we want our classrooms to be well behaved, but we never stop to think, why are they behaving the way they're behaving? Especially when it's a little bit different, you know? Listening's hard work, and it definitely makes, it makes the child tired. On any day, they're tired at the end of the day from listening and concentrating and spending so much time in a rich learning environment. Add a hearing loss to that, whether from an ear infection or for any other reason, makes it even more tiring.
Are they really tuning out because they're not interested? Or are
Good
they really
question.
misbehaving because they have a behavior problem?
Great question. Great question.
Yeah,
All right,
some
let's go
food
on to
for
the next
thought.
one. 90% of all learning is picked up incidentally. That is, by overhearing. What do you think? Is this a myth or a fact?
That is a fact. And I think a lot of people might be surprised by this. How is it that 90% of learning is picked up from overhearing? Overhearing what? Overhearing who? Everything that goes on in the environment is meaningful. If we're having a conversation and the doorbell is ringing behind me, or the phone is ringing, or someone else is having a conversation, that's all information. And if we go back to our first slide, when we talked about stimulation, auditory brain stimulation, well, if kids are not overhearing, or if kids' overhearing is compromised, even if it's a mild hearing loss, then they're not getting that, or they're getting parts, bits and pieces of that. So if 90% of what kids learn is from overhearing, well, then there's a lot that they're not learning if their hearing is compromised, no matter the level of hearing loss, no matter if it doesn't matter if it's a mild loss or a profound loss. There's still information that's not being accessed. And I think that's one of the points that I'd really like to highlight today. Access. Get that information going, get that brain stimulated, get everything that we have a right to get to.
Yeah,
And
when we think
this
about,
also,
hmm,
oh, sorry,
sorry,
Tracey. This also makes me think about what we call the listening bubble, right? We all have our listening bubble. The difference is that how big is your listening bubble? So if there's any type of hearing loss, the listening bubble is not as big or as large as what it should be. So as parents, as friends, as teachers, as specialists, we have to work as hard as we can to really expand that listening bubble so that they can overhear, or they can learn to access.
sorry for cutting you off there, Sal, before. You know what came to mind? Theory of
What?
mind, perspective taking, that social language, that social interaction, those moments where kids learn that not everybody has to have the same opinion, and that's okay. Or to understand that you might see something from one point of view, but I've got a different vantage point, and that's why my opinion is different. Kids learn all of that rich social language as well, how to agree to disagree, how to compromise, how to persuade. All of those things come from overhearing other people do it. And then there's something so I don't know what the word would be, but there's something so fun about being nosy. Like we
Mhm.
want to teach kids not to be nosy, but there's something about listening to something you're not supposed to be listening to that every little kid loves to do. And so, I mean, I think of myself telling parents, hey, why not have a conversation over by the sink about going to the park after dinner? Let's grow your child's listening bubble just a little bit larger. Yes, of course, at a certain point, we want to start teaching them what to listen to, what not to, when is it appropriate and when is it not. But certainly growing that listening bubble by talking about things that are intriguing just out of earshot is a fun way to kind of grow that bubble and also help everybody understand that so much is picked up from incidental moments. So much.
So in a nutshell, this listening bubble, all of this incidental learning in, includes theory of mind, includes humor. It's very important for us to access and understand different tones. If rising intonation or falling intonation is the difference between a question and a statement. These are all things that kids can learn by being taught explicitly, but also learn from overhearing. And overhearing is the natural way of learning. So by expanding this bubble as far as we can through examples like Tracey just mentioned, we'll give our kids the opportunity to really meet those developmental milestones for listening.
All right, we're coming up on our last myth or fact. Geez, that went by fast. Here we are.
Oh, I like this one. Plants can be used to improve the acoustic or the listening environment in classrooms. Myth or fact?
By now, I'm guessing you're on to us and you figured out that this one is a
Maybe.
fact. Plants can improve the acoustic environment in classroom. And you know what's really fun about that? They're in addition to the classroom, they provide beauty, they provide improved air quality, and they're absorbing some of that background noise. If we think about an average classroom having a negative signal to noise ratio, that means there's more noise, ambient noise from chairs moving around, bodies moving around, chit chatting in the back of the room. Sometimes we've got devices going, somebody's got, a speaker on doing something. All of that creates ambient noise, which creates a negative signal to noise ratio. If you consider that a teacher, at least in Montreal, most teachers are not amplified. They're not using a sound field system to cut through that background noise. So when we think about plants, they're so beautiful, they're so calming. Often we might have one on our desk or in the book nook. But if we think about them being important aspects of our classroom setup, then we can kind of place them strategically and have them use up some of the energy, the noise energy that we've got to absorb some of that sound. So if you're thinking about what might be a good Christmas gift for a teacher by any means, maybe a classroom plant to improve the acoustic environment, but also, put a smile on someone's face might be a good example.
And sometimes accessing plants may not be possible given certain situations, and if we think about, oh, how can we make the classroom environment or the acoustic environment better? There's a lot out there, and especially if you Google it up, things can get quite expensive with trying to make a room perfect for listening, like carpets and curtains and soundproof walls. But just being aware of how important the environment is for listening and learning, especially for young children, will automatically give us other ideas, will help us generate other ideas. Hey, if the window's open and it's noisy and it's not too hot, let's close the window. Let's close the door, the classroom door. If the teacher next door is having an activity where things get a little noisy, or at home, if you're having dinner and you're discussing certain topics and the TV is going behind you, yes, overhearing is important too, but so are discussions. You might want to turn that TV down or turn it off for that time. The acoustic environment is so important. So I'm really glad that we're ending off the presentation with this slide.
And with that, we're back to our last slide.
So about us, we are Itinerant Educational Specialists from the Montreal Oral School for the Deaf, the MOSD. Essentially, we're a private school in the public interest. We have 4 educational programs starting from early intervention to preschool and elementary classes from grades 1 to 6. We also have mainstream services. What that means is we have students with hearing loss who attend their local schools, and these range from pre-kindergarten up to grade 11, and that's where you can find Tracey and myself. We also have educational audiology that works side by side with its teachers and integration specialists. If you'd like to know more about us, you can find us online at montrealoralschool.com. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. It was such a pleasure to be with you here today. And Tracey and I sincerely hope that you took home some good takeaways.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.
A big thank you goes out to all the ParentCon speakers, educational partners, and behind-the-scenes organizers. Your commitment to excellence in education is outstanding, and thank you for taking the time to attend this session. We hope you found this session valuable, educational, insightful. For more resources, don't forget to visit the EMSB Parents Committee on Facebook or online at emsbparents.ca.